Hi, welcome to the Broken Not Broke interview, the only podcast for families affected by childhood cancer hosted by a cancer parent. I know you're going through the most difficult chapter of your life. I've been there. But I can assure you that the more information you have about childhood cancer, and especially about organizations and resources for your family, it will make things a little bit easier. Today, we're going to talk to Compass to Care. This organization will assist families specifically with transportation costs. That means if you need to pay for costs for commuting or even to go to a different state for treatment, Compass to Care can assist you. You learn more from the founder and CEO. Also, we're going to have our financial tip, this time about taxes. Let's start with the interview.
Welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here with us. My first question to you, why do childhood cancer has this significant effect on the household finances of families?
That's a really great question. I think it's a myriad of things. First and foremost, when a child is diagnosed with cancer, often parents end up having to reduce their household income as a result of parents either having to take time off work and or leaving their job. So if you and I were to be diagnosed with cancer, we would be able to take medical leave from our careers. And usually that's a long-term paid leave. But for a parent who has a child with cancer, the only reprieve that they have is FMLA, so the Family Medical Leave Act. And in that, it's an unpaid position, or it's unpaid, and parents can take 6 weeks of leave, and their job actually has to hold their position for those 6 weeks. But often, as you know, a childhood cancer journey is way longer than 6 weeks. And if you have a child who's going through this unfortunate reality, going back to work full time is often not an option for parents. And so there's a drastic reduction in their household income as a result. There's also so many out-of-pocket expenses that parents end up facing, not only from paying for deductibles and all of those things with regard to their medical care, but also things like transportation, getting to and from treatments, and finding people to care for other children while they are in the hospital with their own children. So it can be a really slippery slope for even a financially stable family before their child is diagnosed with cancer, to all of a sudden find themselves where they are facing some financial insecurity.
Tell me about the long-term implications. Have you seen in your constituents, in the people that you support, these long-term effects in terms of mobility, economic and social mobility?
You know, it's interesting. So we've had children who've been in treatment for over 10 years. And often, parents will say the community can often come and wrap their arms around these families during that time. Sometimes you'll see fundraisers being held to help support these families. But when it becomes a situation where this child is in this ongoing treatment, it becomes sort of weaved into the fabric of the community, and people stop realizing how challenging it becomes further and further out. Resources are depleted over time, and the longer you're in treatment, the more a family's resources are depleted, including resources from the community. But we also see, running out of PTO and not being able to, lean on some of those other things that are coming about. In addition to the charitable world, parents, can lean on some organizations, and usually there's a cap with the support that people can offer. And so trying to just run through all of these different things can have just this terrible implication on families and leave them really distraught financially for years, even beyond their child's diagnosis.
What can you tell us about the effect on other members of the family, besides the diagnosed child?
It is heartbreaking, the entire journey for the entire family. With the parents, of course, nobody wants to see their child go through something so heartbreaking. And I am certain 100% of parents would trade places with their child in a heartbeat. But we also have siblings who can often be left behind and feel like they're like the lost child in this. I had one parent that was telling me, their child was on this journey and they were coming toward the end. And she said, I know my other child, I'm actually going to cry thinking about it, is at home suffering, but I need to be here in the hospital with this child because if they were to pass, I have to be here. And I feel like I can take care of that other child later. While that makes sense to every parent, that child at home feels that, I've had parents tell me like their child just wanted to be in the hospital bed pushing the remote control buttons and the buttons on the bed because they just felt like they were not being left out of, from a child's eyes, feels like something that is special, right? Even though there's so many terrible things, obviously, but these are children that, are on this journey with their siblings, and it can be a heartbreaker for everybody.
Well, thanks for that story, for sharing. I'm sure that many families, many parents, and many siblings will relate to that situation. What we have also observed is the financial impact that will have on those siblings. Many college funds or luxuries that for a kid, like a toy, a bicycle, etc., had to put on hold because their siblings are going through treatment. I love to hear now about Compass to Care, and please tell us the inspiration behind it, how you came with the idea, and how it's supporting families.
So yes, as you mentioned earlier, I am a childhood cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, so a Wilms tumor, when I was 14 months old. And I'm from a town in Iowa where there isn't an oncologist that cares for children with cancer. Back then, as well as now, there's an oncologist. So immediately upon being diagnosed, I was sent to the Mayo Clinic, which is about 3 hours away from my parents' home. And so I went up there and I had my kidney removed. I went through radiation therapy, and then I went through 1.5 years of chemotherapy. As you can imagine, took a toll on our family in so many ways. But my parents always talked about the financial implication that it had on them. My dad was the sole breadwinner of the family. When I was in the hospital having my nephrectomy, my mom found out that she was pregnant again. So that would have been her 4th child. And it was really tough times for my parents. My dad always told a story about how he didn't have enough money when I was unexpectedly hospitalized to get home because my mom needed to keep the car. And so he ended up hitchhiking back home. And luckily, somebody safe picked him up and got him back so that he could get back to work. Because if he wasn't working, he was going to either lose his job, and or all of our financial security in our family. So I entered my career in the healthcare field, and I most recently was a VP of marketing for a pharmaceutical company. And it was in the oncology space, and I realized that my parents were not alone in facing the challenges of funding their transportation to and from treatment, and that when your child is going through this extraordinarily challenging journey, a parent should not have to even think about taking the first steps of a 200-mile walk home so that they can get back there to go to work. And so I end up leaving the corporate world to start Compass to Care. And our focus has always been to fund transportation between the home and the hospital for parents who are facing some financial insecurity while their child is going through cancer treatment. So we initially, you have to start someplace. We initially started as an organization that was really focused on funding rural families or families who are from a more distant suburb to get their child to treatment. And so we started paying for gasoline and parking for those families. We then, from the company that I came from, most recently, they are a manufacturer in the proton therapy space, and they even still, proton therapy is often a journey that families have to make to access. And so they end up funding us to provide support for families to actually fly to and from treatments. And so, we embarked on just a different aspect of the childhood cancer journey in getting families to specialized treatment by paying for flights, ground transportation, and lodging. And then during COVID, I was, so in the city of Chicago, people from low-income households were having a hard time getting to locations where they could get 2 COVID shots. And so Uber actually provided $1 million grant for these people to be able to get to those 2 shots. And I realized, wow, if people cannot get to 2 COVID shots, then urban families probably are having similar struggles in getting their children to cancer treatment, which is over and over and over again, not just two times. And so we end up developing a program with an organization called Kaizen Health, where we actually fund Uber and Lyft transportation for parents who do not have access to a vehicle to get their children to treatment. So we have, we started out really looking at Iowa and Illinois families because those are my 2 homes. But the word quickly spread and we started getting calls from all across the country because it is a challenge that far too many families are facing. And so, we have become a national provider and a top national provider for transportation for children who are on the cancer journey that need transportation support to reach their treatment.
Well, a story, again, very inspirational. I will notice great strategic planning, great. The building blocks that you mentioned make so much sense. As I see many families going through this. The rural aspect is very obvious when you see a map of treatment centers, especially some specialized, as you say, protons or neutrons radiation. But as you said, even in urban centers, you hear constantly people, taking the bus to chemo, subway in cities that have that means of transportation. This is not ideal, as anyone who knows how the treatments have effects to have a child in public transportation, not for other reason, but because the body, has so many side effects and symptoms.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a request from New York City, a very robust transportation system. A family was living in transitional housing because they were having a lot of financial challenges. They had a child going through treatments, and then they had a 1-year-old. And you still have to be able to pay for a bus. You still have to be able to pay for the subway, which they couldn't. The social worker had found them an option to get them to treatment, but it was going to cost $3 for the family that they could not afford. And so the mom was walking the 2 children, and the 1 child was actually terminal, to treatment. And they called us and said, is there a way that you can help them? And we said, absolutely. Again, the childhood cancer journey is just so heartbreaking, but when you are facing financial challenges at the same time, it is even more devastating. And a parent does not want to give up on any time that they possibly have with their child, even if that means getting out on the streets of New York City and walking to the hospital for their child's care. And I mean, it's across the board, like you said, flights. It shouldn't just be wealthy children that can get flights to get to specialized treatment that could save their child's life. All the way down to we can't afford a bus, fare for myself and my 2 children to get to the cancer treatment. And everything in between, we try to be a resource for those families that, can ensure that their child is not going to miss treatment, because missing treatment has an impact on survival. And also helping a parent know that they have given everything that they possibly could to be able to save their child's life in case this journey does end. They don't want to feel like there was something available that I couldn't access because I couldn't afford to get there. And so we want to be certain to be a resource for all of those families during just these detrimental times.
And I believe you have, looking at the numbers in your website, and I encourage everyone to go and look at compass2care.org to see the impact that Michelle and her team are having in so many families. Is outstanding, and every family, I'm sure, will always remember that support. It's a good moment to turn to another question, Michelle. What will be your recommendations, your suggestions, your thoughts, even in major changes at the policy level, at a systemic level, at even a structural level, that will make a difference for these families in terms of financial matters in childhood cancer?
So you may not know, but Medicaid has non-emergency medical transportation that families can access. The unfortunate thing is doesn't work. And there's a lot of different things. Again, for like, let's talk about a rural family. So sometimes these rural families end up having to get on transportation with other people, which means the journey ends up being so much longer. You also can only bring one child with you. So if you have other children, they cannot join the ride. And then if anybody who's ever been through this knows that there's so many unknowns. And so the unknown of like, oh, I need transportation right now, those kinds of things don't work. They also have a funding arm of their transportation where they will help families pay for transportation. And so last year we said, okay, let's try to figure this out. Because if we can tap into, for our Medicaid patients, some of the funding that is available, then we can utilize our resources for non-Medicaid families. And it turned into more work than it has to start someplace else besides our organization. We tried to get funding for a family, and they end up putting the family on the state payroll. And because I said, oh, well, we're going to reimburse them money. And as a result of reimbursing money, we're going to have to turn around and put them on our payroll, which seems obscene. I mean, just ridiculous. This family had zero income at the time. She said, we do not even file taxes. And I'm fearful this is going to then take away from my Medicaid support that I'm getting for everything else. And I mean, that's just one of the stories of like how backward the system is. While you think, wow, there's funding available out there, it is so hard to access. It took us 3 months to even get that family from the application, which my program manager sat down and did with the family. 2 hours it took to complete the application to the end point of we're going to add you to our payroll and your reimbursement now becomes income for your family. So I think there's opportunity to perhaps fix that system. But that is going to take a lot of work. I also feel like there is opportunity within the insurance companies to start to cover transportation and fully cover childhood cancer treatments, whether as it's specialized treatments, experimental treatments, and capping the out-of-pocket expenses that families are facing. We have so many families that come to us, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt as a result of their child's cancer journey. It's definitely ways that the insurance companies can support these families during these times. Also, if there could be a paid FMLA for parents, their child's going through a cancer treatment, giving parents the opportunity to have some kind of reimbursement from their work to make sure that they are not going from perhaps two incomes to one income to none, which has just this detrimental financial implication that at the end of the day can affect a child's survival. If a parent cannot afford these out-of-pocket expenses that come with their child's cancer journey, their child is not going to survive. And we've seen it over and over again where a parent cannot afford to get their child to treatment. And without resources like Compass to Care, and we're just, a small fraction of the families that we can support, a small fraction of the families that need help. And so there just has to be some larger changes within the healthcare system to be able to really move the needle and ensure that all children have access to the care that they need so that their lives can be spared.
I completely agree. I think there's so many opportunities at policy, systemic, industry level to make a difference in the life of so many families that are going through this heartbreaking situation that is most of the time devastating for the financial stability of a home. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Anything else you want to share with us, Michelle?
I just really appreciate the work that you're doing in helping families to find the resources that they need. Some hospitals are just packed with social workers that hold the hands of children. And other hospitals do not have as deep of pockets to be able to fund, robust social work departments. And sometimes families are not led to where it is that they can find the support that they need. And so there's so many organizations out there doing great work for families. And transportation, while it has an immediate impact on a family and their ability to get a child to treatment, there's so many other needs that these families have. And having a place where they can turn to find those resources, I think, is going to be exceptional for them. And, at the end of the day, we're all trying to provide a little bit of relief and a little bit of hope for these families. So thank you for that.
Well, we appreciate your comments. Well, we appreciate more that you spend this time with us, sharing your insights, sharing your own personal story, and as well as outstanding initiatives and jobs and programs that Compass to Care have, and now at the national level in so many ways, helping families that need the support the most. So to everyone, please visit compass2care.org, and you will find all the information there about this organization. If you are looking for support, there is a very easy process to apply for. But more important, if you can donate, please do that. Please support this organization. It's very important. And also find us in brokenNotbroke.org. Portal that facilitates information about more than 400 organizations nationwide that support families impacted by childhood cancer, in particular in financial matters. Well, thank you so much to our guest, Michelle Ernsdorff-May, to everyone at Compass to Care. We'll see you next time for the next edition of the Broken Not Broke interview.
It's tax season, and therefore, it's a good moment to talk about the financial impact of childhood cancer. For all the families affected by childhood cancer, expenses go way higher, and medical expenses are a very big chunk of that. So something that you can do is to make sure you have a list of all these expenses to see if they are deductible in your taxes. Anything above 7.5% of your adjusted gross income could be deducted. So make sure you have a list of everything and give it to either an accountant or a tax specialist, or even if you're doing your taxes on your own, have all that information, because that might make a big difference in your finances. Thank you so much for being with us in this episode of the Broken Not Broke interview. Please make sure to check us in our socials within LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as you can see this episode in Spotify and YouTube, where you can subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you so much to our producer, Vanessa Toro, and see you next time.